Hello everyone and welcome to the promised Bennett and Nicole comparison for Arlecchino. So what I've realized is that the difference between Nicole's talent level 9 and 10 on the skill is only 30 flat attack, and that's very close to just giving your team 2 extra flat attack substats in the DPS dummy modifier thingy. So I've been able to do a lot of testing over the last few days and there is a lot to talk about. So let's just hop right into it. I'm gonna structure this video similarly to the Nephra one, where I'll talk about the results first and all the disclaimers, then go into each archetype and talk about them more in depth, because there are things you need to keep in mind about certain rotations, especially for official, and then in the end I'll give my opinion and recommendations. I'll also be sure to leave timestamps for everything. Okay, so disclaimers first. I am sorry to say that there will be a lot of it depends in this video, because whether Nicole or Bennett is better for you will depend a lot on what constellation your official is, what constellation is your Chevreuse, what constellation is your Arlecchino, are you doing the new walk cancels, what weapons do you have on your supports, how much energy recharge do you have on your supports, how much do you value a shield, etc, etc. Second thing is that the results I get on my own account are based on my own account, and what's best for me might not be best for you. I have tried to do some more general simulations where applicable. For example, if my Chevreuse wasn't C6, could replacing her with a C0 Durin still be better than a belt? And I will get to that when I get to that, and I will try my best to give general advice where I can. And the third thing is that my skill level, my patience, my choices, and the amount of rotations I did per run will also affect the results, mainly when it comes to comparing melt and overload. Spoilers, but my current Nicole overload team is now just better than my melt team. But if I did do the new walk cancels and just put in dozens of hours into making sure I didn't miss a single melt for 6 rotations in a row, then yeah, melt would probably stay better. Again, I will go more into that in the melt specific section. Okay, that about covers the disclaimers. Now let me break down the runs themselves. For each team, I did about 6 rotations, or roughly 95 seconds per run. I did multiple runs per team, and I selected what I think is the best representative of each run. Some were easier than others. For example, I got a good Monopyro run I was satisfied with on the second attempt. Meanwhile, a good melt run took me a few hours. And the reason for 6 rotations is that it's a nice even number for TTDS. It gives enough time for the overall bond of life value to even out. It gives me some wiggle room for mistakes, since one small error here and there won't cripple the entire run, and it's a nice number for a business DJ. The builds for my Arlecchino and official stayed the same for every run. Bennett, in every team he was used, was on Noblesse and Missplitter at C6 with a Crowned Burst. Nicole was on a simulated Crowned skill on Celestial Gift and Skyward Atlas, and I did one TTDS run for Overload as well. Chevy was on C6 on Song of Days Past and Black Tassel. Durin was on a simulated Day Carved set and Wolfang, and Citlali was on Scroll and simulated TTDS. Anywhere where something about the builds need to be pointed out, I will point it out. Okay, finally, it's time to talk about the results. Starting off with Melt, this should come as no surprise, but Bennett was significantly ahead of Nicole here for a multiple reasons. First is that this is the team where Arlecchino has the highest team DPS contribution, and Bennett in a vacuum just does buff Arlecchino more. Second is that this team has a lot of front-loaded damage because of Sucrose's buff expiring, and Nicole's gimmick of having to wait 3 seconds for the extra attack buff kinda gimps that damage. And third is that having the Hexenzirkel resonance doesn't do much here. Like, yeah, we get the extra 20 pyro from the Celestial Gift set, but we don't get almost anything from Sucrose. For Overload, this did come as a surprise to me at least, but Nicole actually pulled ahead of Bennett by a pretty fine margin. There are a few factors to this, main one being that having Nicole here unlocks the Hexenzirkel resonance, so with C6 Fischl, we get a pretty big 45% attack buff to both Arlecchino and Fischl. Also, she does actually have shorter animation time than Bennett, because with my ER on Bennett being around 250, I did need to use his skill past the second rotation, and so I was actually able to squeeze in just a couple extra normal attacks here and there. Her longer buff uptime also does add up for some extra damage, and there are also other smaller things that I just can't fit into this section, so I will leave that for the in-depth part. And for Monopyro, I decided to test that because might as well, right? And so I pulled out the old faithful Bennett, Shilone, and Kazuha and compared it with the fresh new Nicole Durin Prune. Again, it's gonna depend blah 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 on weapons, constellations, all that stuff. But for me, the new core of Nicole, Durin, and Prune was actually very similar to the classics. What's interesting here though is, despite my Prune being level 70 and not having any of her talents touched at all, she somehow managed to end up doing 5% of my team's damage in the end. So if I was to give her like even a little bit of crit and level her up and her talents, as well as level my Durin's talents, like, I'm sorry fellas, but but these are 3 completely new characters on my account and I just don't have the resources right now. But after a few weeks of farming, I can definitely see them pulling comfortably ahead. Okay, that was it for the TLDR section. I hope that you are still with me because there is a lot of nuance here. Let's go back to Mel. On my account, with my builds, with my playstyle, the difference between Nicole and Bennett was around 10k DPS. If I were to use the walk cancels, which I will leave a link to Murad's video on how to do them, the difference would have been even bigger. It would have also been bigger if my Arlecchino was C1 or C2 or C3 or honestly just any constellation. And if I was playing better, the difference would also be bigger. But keep in mind, I am playing for 6 rotations straight and doing multiple runs, and sometimes a good run will just get completely ruined by me randomly disconnecting from the servers for a few seconds. 6 and 3D was just the most consistent option for me. And something else to keep in mind is that this is literally peak Bennett compared to what I would say is beginner Nicole. Whether you think Skyward Atlas is beginner or not, well, it is what it is. But point being that Bennett can literally not get any better unless they release a higher base attack sword, which I mean they could, but it's not guaranteed and you would have to pull for it still. Meanwhile, Nicole can only get better. I'm not sure exactly what would be the best constellation pull order, and I'm sure it will be different depending on what constellation your Arlecchino currently is. For example, at C0 Arlecchino, C1 or R1 Nicole might be equal to Bennett or pull slightly ahead, but at C1 Arlecchino, Bennett would probably still be better since Arlecchino C1 is just a raw motion value increase, and that's basically what Nicole's C1 is, but worse. So yeah, it's complicated and I can't cover literally everything. What I can say is that this is a vertical investment team, and Nicole is someone you should consider if you are doing vertical investment. It's also important to keep in mind that constellations on Arlecchino only buff Arlecchino, but constellations on Nicole buff anybody who would be using her as well. Also, if you're wondering why is my Citlali on Fab in the footage, it's because my Bennett on Misplitter is missing like 1 roll of ER to be perfect, and you can't change ER in the settings unfortunately, so I just put Citlali on Fab and gave Arlecchino a 20% attack buff to simulate TTDS at half uptime. It's a scuffed setup, but I think over 6 rotations it evens out, and it's also easier for testing because I don't feel like waiting 20 seconds every time I mess up a rotation because I don't know if TTDS had been triggered or not. So yes, technically Bennett does have an unfair advantage here, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think literally just 1 or 2 extra ER rolls would have fixed it, but oh well. Okay then, Overload. Wow, I mean, I literally never saw this coming. I pulled for Nicole because I liked her, even though I don't have Arca or Kinich, thinking that she's probably gonna be sitting on the bench for most of the time, but she turned out to be not only my new highest DPS Arlecchino team, but also a super comfortable quality of life improvement too. The highest difference between my Bennett and Nicole in Overload was almost 10k DPS, but looking back, I think I had just gotten super lucky with my crits on Arlecchino on that run. But still, I had a lot of runs where it averaged more around 7k difference, and that's still pretty significant. Even with TTDS, she was about 5k better. Now again, if my official was not C6, the difference would have been less, same for my Chevreuse, but it is what it is, and I'll take the upgrade. Now, I imagine some of you might be surprised by this, and maybe you even went into practice range yourself and gotten totally different results, but the way you play Fischl might be causing you some issues. So, in the Bennett team, Fischl's burst can be cancelled early by swapping out mid-animation, and she will still snapshot the full buff. If you do that with Nicole though, you will end up not snapshotting one of her buffs. I'm not sure exactly which one it is, but the damage will just be lower, so you will have to fly the full duration. However, when you're using Fischl's skill every other rotation to refresh Oz, in the Bennett team, you might not be staying on field for long enough for Bennett's burst to apply. So what I recommend is that you hold the skill for like half a second and then release to make sure you get the buff. And with Nicole, you do get the buff immediately. You already have it before you swap, so you don't gotta worry about that. Nicole also has a few other advantages here. Obviously, there is the shield and not having to worry about her burst at all. I could talk infinitely about that and it wouldn't matter because how important those things are to you is totally up to you. One thing that does matter though is the buff uptime. Bennett's burst will unfortunately expire just a bit before you're finished with your Arlecchino's combos, and that does actually add up over time. You need to use Bennett's burst first because because you have to snapshot the buff unofficial. It is what it is. Nicole just has 20 seconds of uptime, so that's not a problem. And also every other buff on the Nicole team has infinite uptime, which is pretty cool, except the one after being on field for 3 seconds. And even that downside is actually not that significant because everyone's animation time in this team is super short, so oftentimes you'll swap back to your Arlecchino before your skill is even finished cooking, and you can do 2 or 3 normal attacks before you claim it. Meanwhile, Nicole will be observing you while you do that, so you will get the full buff pretty early in the rotation. Now, a bit of a personal story. When I made my Arlecchino video a few months ago, someone actually messaged me on Discord with a well-crafted document trying to convince me that Bennett was better for Overload than Yansan, which is who I was using at the time for a variety of reasons. They came out with some sims, because this was before we had the practice dummies, and one of them also included a Shilonen versus Sucrose comparison as well. The sims claimed that Shilonen was a better DPS option than Sucrose because her buffs last longer. And personally, I've always been very suspicious of sims in general, but extra suspicious of Arlecchino sims because especially in Melt, the rotations can be very precise and I just don't 100% know how the sims work, so I can't trust them. So what I did was I put an awkward but consistent build on Arlecchino that wouldn't kill any overworld bosses, and hand tested both rotations and then went back into the recording, counted each damage instance and added them all together. Damn, the shit we were doing before Miliastra was kinda crazy now that I think about it. But basically it turned out that the sim was indeed wrong and my personal suspicions of the sims was validated. And so I thought that was the end of the story, but I failed to notice that there were actually multiple pages to the document. But at that point I was so tired of counting and debating and recording and all that shit, because this was also after weeks of recording and theory crafting before that, and I just basically said, yo, listen, I'm just gonna assume that the Bennett sims had the same kind of error, and then I just basically ignored it. But this was my biggest mistake because all this time Bennett was indeed just better than Yansan by an embarrassingly large amount that I'm too ashamed to disclose. I do still stand by what I said about her being better in a way because she wasn't circle impact, and Overload is a very mobile reaction at its core because it knocks back enemies. But still, I was turbo wrong, and I hope that you can accept my apology, Mr. Question Mark, or Mrs. or they. You were trying to make me see the light, but I was blinded by the darkness. Thankfully though, we have Nicole now, and I wasn't wrong for very long, at the very least. So yeah, you can see how I might be a little emotionally invested in Nicole being better. But anyways, back to the video. Sorry for going on a tangent. I also compared Chevreuse to Durin because I wanted to know roughly how much damage I was losing if she wasn't C6, and Durin was the closest match because he gives a 35% rest red and Chevy's 40%, so it's pretty close. And while he does not give a 40% attack bonus, he does deal personal damage, so I figured that might even it out. And the results were disappointing, put it mildly. Over a 30k DPS decrease. I don't know, maybe I played it badly, maybe I didn't give him enough buffs to compensate for his talent levels, I don't know. It could also be that he has an 18-second burst cooldown. Like, the rotations were unholy. That's honestly the best word I can use to describe them. Something primal inside me was deeply disturbed by me having to recast Arlecchino's skill mid-combo on rotation number 4 or whatever. But yeah, it does work, it can be done, it can be improved almost certainly by having a better build on Durin or having his signature weapon. Definitely something you should consider if your Chevy isn't C6. And last but not least, I did compare Monopyro, and like I said, the results are very similar, within 2k DPS. Honestly super close, but the new version with Durin and Prune can definitely be improved. Prune did have a shocking 5% damage contribution even at level 70 with untouched talent levels, and my Durin's talents could have been crowned as well. Overall, it's a pretty nice, chill, comfortable but strong Monopyro team, but the Kazuha variant does have an advantage in AoE because it has Kazuha. They have fairly similar weapon investment options too, since Shilonen's and Nicole's weapons basically give the same buff to Arlecchino, and Durin's and Kazuha signatures sound about the same as well. Again, constellations on your Arlecchino will favor the team that has Arlecchino contributing the most damage to the team, aka the Bennett team, but if you're picking up her cons, then you're probably not worrying yourself about which Monopyro team is better. And that about covers it. If you've made it all this way, I appreciate you staying and listening to the nuances. And now my opinion on Nicole. I like her and I think she's a good addition to the Arlecchino teams. More options is always better, and she does also bring undeniable quality of life improvements as well. Would I recommend you pulling her only for Arlecchino? Not really. If you already have a C6 Bennett, you would just be better off pulling cons on Arlecchino herself. But if you have other teams where she could be useful, or having a powerful shield is meaningful to you, then I don't think she will be a disappointment. And there is the fact that Nicole herself does have vertical investment options. You can get her C1, her C2, her signature, and any other constellation will benefit Arlecchino and anyone else who you might use her for. Meanwhile, getting cons on your Arlecchino will benefit only Arlecchino. At the end of the day, it's your account, your Primogems, and your choice. I just hope that I was able to give you some helpful insight in any way, shape, or form in this video. If you did like the video, then leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, or I will execute a hostage. And until next time, see ya!